Back in 2017, Microsoft announced they were returning to Age of Empires. At E3 they announced the remaster of the original Age of Empires game from 1997, and then only a few months later at Gamescom they announced remasters for both the second and third installments too. And the big news that day? Microsoft is making a fourth game. It seems there is still life in Microsoft's real-time strategy franchise. This week the last of the 3 remasters will release. And it's not the most beloved game of the trilogy, but hey, it's part of the family. Welcome to Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition. Age of Empires 3 has always been the weird child of the trilogy. Ensemble Studios, the original creators of the game, had truly innovated the franchise with this entry, bringing in new features like a card system, hero units, and most importantly, a very diverse set of civilizations. The game is set in the Age of Discovery. It features Native American, European, and Asian factions. The concept of the game is that you're not an empire by yourself, unlike in the previous Age of Empires games, but that you're a small part of an empire. You have a home base which you can send your equipment and resources. Base building in Age of Empires 3 can be better described as building a colony or an outpost. With the remaster, World's Edge, Tantalus Media and Forgotten Empires have brought 2020 to this 2005 game. With Xbox Live integration, 4K assets and a new user interface, server-based matchmaking in multiplayer and a new soundtrack with additional music. But there's also new content to enjoy here too. So what's the full package of Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition? It includes the 2005 main game and the expansions, the War Chiefs and the Asian Dynasties. On top of that, the developers have added new content. To help you out on your first path to strategy excellence, a new tutorial has been added to the game. These are called the Art of War and teach you everything you need to know about playing Age of Empires 3. From early economies, build orders to naval battles, you can earn bronze, silver or gold medals in these activities depending upon how well you manage to complete them. All these are explained to you by the fine von Clausewitz, who, for the historical geeks among us, was a Prussian general and military theorist. I have no idea if I pronounced that name correctly. Overall, I enjoyed them and I think they're beneficial for players who want to compete online. Besides that, the developers have added something fresh to the game: historical battles. These are exactly what you think they are, a series of scripted skirmish missions built to simulate famous historic battles set in the age in which Age of Empires 3 takes place. They are a fun addition and will deliver you a couple of hours of additional fun. Where the developers haven't added much is in the campaign. There is no extra content here besides the remastered cutscenes and some changes to the War Chiefs campaign. But I can imagine it's been a long while for many people since they've played these, and it's still a fun campaign to play through. The multiplayer has been revamped entirely. It is now operating on Microsoft's Xbox Live services and has server-based hosting. Age of Empires 3 still has an active community who play the game, which will probably become even bigger after the launch of this remaster. So for everyone looking to take their skirmish skills against the world, there are ample opportunities to do this. The skirmish mode is where I put myself to the test without embarrassing myself to other people. Playing against 2 or 3 hard AI is a fun way to keep the game engaging. The new factions added to the game are the Swedes and the Inca. The Inca are more relatable for Age of Empires 2 players. With the Inca you'll be building your city and fortifications and playing a more defensive strategy. Those stone walls will be hard to tear down. The Swedes are a pure Age of Empires 3 civilization with an emphasis on gunpowder and mercenaries. Age of Empires 3 was a really good looking game back in 2005. The water was stunning and the units were very detailed even back then, and to be fair, even today the game looks fine. This led me to question if a full remaster of this game was even necessary. Sure, the new units look a lot better, those 4K assets really do the trick, but it now feels like those assets don't come to life as much due to the limited animations which are very much sometimes stuck in 2005. The environments of the game are stunning. The remaster has done those justice for sure. The water is as beautiful as ever, and more importantly, which sometimes horribly goes wrong in remasters, the game hasn't changed the art style. You feel like you're playing the same game you did 15 years ago. I'm sure some people wouldn't even notice the difference if they hadn't recently played the non-definitive edition for a while. And that's a good thing. Recently, Warcraft 3 Reforged has shown that the opposite can turn out quite badly. Even though the new assets look great, they don't solve an issue I've had with Age of Empires 3 in the past, and that's fights can look messy. When engaging in a big fight, it's sometimes hard to actually see what's happening. A big plus, however, is the ability to zoom further out. This was added to the other remasters too, and it's an absolute godsend. One of the bigger improvements is the new user interface. It looks clean and modern while keeping that Age of Empires 3 style. A neat feature is the ability to change your UI. There is Classic, Definitive, and the Default. The Classic and Default ones are fairly similar, whilst the Definitive UI will be a pleasant addition for people who've played more real-time strategy games in recent years, with resources at the top and the map on the bottom left corner. Gameplay is where all discussion surrounding the third instalment of Age begins. It's here where Ensemble Studios had taken the most risks in the original release. The addition of hometowns and cards is, even today, a refreshing aspect in the strategy genre. When playing, you can call in help, upgrades, resources or reinforcements from your hometown, and this works via a card system. Players can build their deck before the game starts, and experience points are needed to use the cards. Before, these decks led to some discussion as they weren't properly balanced for new players. Luckily, the developers have fixed this. You can still do deck building, but all players will be able to play on a level playing field. Players can also upgrade their hometown, which gives them the option to use new cards in single player. Personally, I think the card and hometown system is an interesting and fun mechanic in Age of Empires 3 and not deserving of all the negative feedback. An aspect of the game for which I do understand the negative feedback is the lack of balance overall. Some civilizations are still way stronger than others, which can hopefully be fixed in later patches. Something that has turned many strategy fans off of Age of Empires 3 is the lack of accessible rock, paper, scissors mechanics, or rather the perception of the lack thereof. People started playing Age of Empires 3 coming off of the very accessible and easy to understand second instalment and expected, well, more of the same. But Age of Empires 3 isn't as easy to understand due to the time period. Many strategy game players have grown up with the idea of swordmen, pikemen and knights. The guns introduced in Age of Empires 3 turned many of them off, which is probably the reason why Relic and Microsoft are opting for returning to the Middle Ages for Age of Empires 4. Another change in the formula is the diversity of the factions. After the first two games in the series became popular, things changed in the world of strategy games. Games like Warcraft 3 and Red Alert 2 introduced more unique and diverse factions. The change in the industry is reflected by Age of Empires 3. Factions have different playstyles and feel different to play. For example, the Dutch have banks, which guarantees them a lot of decent late game income, but their settlers cost gold instead of food, making them very weak in the early game. The Japanese use shrines for a guaranteed income, which they preferably place nearby herding animals for extra income. This means the Japanese base is much bigger. Age of Empires 3 has always been a faster paced game than the first two instalments. Some people may like it, others may be turned off by it. It's no StarCraft by any means, but you'll notice the difference in pace when coming off of Age of Empires 2. The game does have some bugs, sadly enough. Sometimes your worker will refuse to build something, and on some occasions some of my units became stuck on top of a mountain or inside an inaccessible valley. A bigger annoyance than the small bugs are the snare effect and formations. The snare effect means that units will slow down when being hit. When you expect your army to run, because surprisingly enough you're losing a battle, you want them to flee from the battlefield. In Age of Empires 3 it can feel like they're crawling away rather than running full pelt. Same for the formations. As units make clusters, they also slow down units overall and oftentimes completely ruin the run animations. It's these kind of things you'd like to see fixed or adjusted in a remaster, but as the team has been updating Age of Empires 2 since release, there is some hope here that they'll work on this element too. Besides adding 2 new nations to the game, Microsoft and the developers have gone out of their way to improve the historical accuracy of the Native American factions in the game. They've worked with tribal consultants to make changes to those factions. Besides that, they've also changed a core component of their gameplay. Gold has been removed from their economy, as these tribes didn't use gold, but fur as a means for trading. Oh, and they've redone the voice acting for these 2 Native American tribes too. Overall, a good improvement which should be applauded. The soundtrack for the original Age of Empires 3 was fantastic, and it didn't suddenly become less fantastic because of the time that's passed. The new songs for each faction are a nice addition. Last but not least, we don't want you to miss out on this information, are the cheat codes. Age of Empires has always had some quite amusing cheat codes. In Age of Empires 2 you could summon a cobra car or turn all birds into flying dogs. In Age of Empires 3 you can spawn monster trucks, a pig flying on a rainbow, or George Crushington, a hopping statue that crushes everything in its path. With Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition, you're getting a full package of strategy fun, just hampered by some design decisions that were made 15 years ago which haven't been fixed yet. It may sound like I'm being too harsh towards this 3rd instalment in the franchise. It's often seen as the bastard of the family, the failed or even the unwanted child. But Age of Empires 3 has brought the strategy genre forward like not many games in the genre have done since. The introduction of the hometowns and the card system were great steps, and the diverse playstyles and mechanics of all of the different civilizations has elevated Age of Empires into a deeper and more interesting franchise. It just chose the wrong time period for innovation. The things developers of real-time strategy games have learned from Age of Empires 3 has inspired and will inspire every new instalment in the genre. And I'm sure Relic and World's Edge have been taking a close look at Age of Empires 3 for the development of the 4th game, as we can already see some similarities with the different mechanics per faction and the amount of factions. An amazing soundtrack, beautiful landscapes, great quality of life improvements and a more modern UI have enhanced Age of Empires 3 Definitive Edition more than enough to justify its existence, even though it wasn't even really needed graphics wise. Whilst maybe a slightly unnecessary remaster, it's been a very pleasant one to replay. With this remaster, Age of Empires 3 can proudly stand next to the other games in the franchise. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this review, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe if you want to see more content from XboxEra, and maybe even ring that little notification bell so you can be notified when we drop some fresh content. And we'll see you next time.